I want to give you some credit, Ameshia, because too many times we watch cable news and we see people not being called out, and we see lies about our history being put out there, and they're not being checked. And even if they are mildly checked, it's so mild as it doesn't feel like a check. And I want to shout you out because you were on CNN talking about Trump saying that his lawyers are going to review the National Museum of African American History and Culture. He said it's out of control, and it focuses on too much of how bad slavery was. How bad slavery was. How bad. Was there a good part to it? Nothing about success, nothing about brightness, nothing about the future. So his attorneys are going to undergo a similar process as they did against universities and colleges. He also said that this country cannot be woke because woke is broke. So they're going to target 8 museums, including the National Museum of African American History and Culture, which the late, great Joe Madison on these airwaves raised money for. And here's a clip of you on CNN after somebody tried to downplay what Trump is doing right now. Listen to this.
There's been partisanship at the Smithsonian for a long time now, and Donald Trump is.
This isn't about partisanship. This is about sheer racism. This is a president who wants to eradicate America's original sin. This is a president with his statements might as well have said the N-word with the hard ER. He does not care about Black America, and he wants to eradicate our history. That's what this is.
Mike?
I couldn't disagree with you more on that. And I
all the anti-DEI policies, all the anti-CRT policies, all of the policies to dismantle civil rights. He is working very hard to eradicate one of the most tough parts of American history. As the only Black person at this table, I think that it is quite frankly disingenuous to argue in any other direction because he's shown time and time again who he is, and we honestly believe him.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Doing a presidential check of museums is straight out of Russia, straight out of 1930s Germany. It's really disturbing, all under the lens of this patriotic education bullshit. And what really pisses me off is that I hear so many Republicans say, small government, small government, small government. How is it small government if a president of the United States is going to have his lawyers go into 8 museums and decide if it's too quote unquote woke? But Ameshia, go ahead. I just appreciated you calling it out like it is.
No, and it had to be because I felt like this is a moment. First and foremost, I was the only Black person on that panel. But in addition to that, this is a president who's gone out of his way to try to not only erase Black people and our successes. He wants to talk about the downtrodden, but he's also creating through his policy actives and directives ways that stop Black people from going to college, ways that prevent them from having access, ways that also allow for the removal of and to not ascend to the C-suite, ways that make it harder for Black people to get healthcare access. I feel like this is a president who has designed every single bit of his policy to the erasure and the harm of Black people, meanwhile wanting to make everyone forget that slavery ever existed. Because in his mind, for Americans to acknowledge slavery means that they have to acknowledge all of the outputs that came from it. We can't talk about slavery without also talking about Reconstruction. And I know, Clay, you wrote a book that very well covers it. We can't talk about Reconstruction without also talking about what came after that in Jim Crow. We can't talk about redlining. There are so many, if you eradicate slavery as a precept to how America not only built its money and its wealth and made it a superpower, you also have to talk about the ways in which Black people have faced an uphill battle to not only reach a level of equity, but to honestly just stay alive. And if we can castigate and call out and be very loud about Holocaust deniers, nobody can say the Holocaust didn't happen. There are survivors of the Holocaust. There are people who wrote about the tragedy that it was. There are people who wrote about being enslaved. There are people who have literal records of that enslavement. And we are not so far removed as somebody whose grandparents are from Mississippi, as somebody whose great-grandparents were Mississippi and Louisiana, as somebody whose great-great-grandparents and beyond were in Virginia and were slaves in all of those states. It frustrates me to think that this president, this White House, and the MAGA aligned individuals who stand in the gap and speak for him as spokespeople on various platforms are actually okay with and are amplifying that slavery wasn't that bad. I know we can't, go back in time, but what I do know is that ripping babies from their mothers and selling them as soon as they were born is wrong. What I do know is that raping women is wrong. What I do know is that beating Black men within inches of their life and castrating them is wrong. What I know is that putting a line item cost on human bodies and only counting them as 3/5 of a person is wrong. So for anyone to try to erase the fact that any of that happened, I think not only takes away from the progress of America, because we've come a long ass way, but it also denies the resilience, the strength, the work that African Americans across this country have done for so long to get to where we are today.
Well said, Ameshia. And the other thing too, Dr. Omékongo, is that the National Museum of African American History and Culture is not the Slavery Museum.
That's right.
I've been there several times. It's just one part towards the bottom, the first floor, if you will, of the museum. It's not the Slavery Museum at all. But I heard Abby Phillips yesterday on her show, and she did an intro, and then she had some folks there on the panel talking. Bakari Sellers was there. And one of the things that I really want people to understand is that while we haven't seen a president do this to this extreme, the attempt of the erasure of our history is nothing new. The minute the Civil War ends, literally the minute the Civil War ends, there is the lost cause narrative that is being pushed out there. That, oh, slavery wasn't that bad. It wasn't that big of a deal. It wasn't that bad. There are plenty of happy people who were enslaved. There's that. Then you have the United Daughters of the Confederacy writing our textbooks. Then in the early 1900s, you have Confederate monuments being erected. Folks think those were erected after the Civil War. No, it was in the early 1900s as an intimidation act during Jim Crow. I went to Rutgers University. In 1969, there was an uprising at Rutgers University to teach Black history. There's been pushback and fighting for a very long time. It's different for the president to want to bring in his lawyers, but the intent is exactly the same. This is nothing new. Now, normally you'd see it more from, the White Citizens Council in Mississippi. You'd see it more locally in an area, but he's doing it without that title. And they've been doing this since April of 1865. We must rewrite this history. And it's not just because of Black kids, but they don't want to. They don't want to make any John Browns. They don't want to create any Thaddeus Stevens. They don't want to create any Charles Sumners. Of folks who are going to say, "Wait a minute, this is the real history." So it's a long time plot of neo-Confederates. Go ahead, Dr. Omékongo.
Yeah, it's never going to stop and never has stopped. And be mindful, Trump visited the museum back in 2020 and, said it was a great museum, lovely history and so on.
Done with love.
Yeah, so the hypocrisy is real. And let's be mindful of the fact that this is part of a longer, more extensive program than just the Smithsonian. As many of us know, the Department of Education is partnering with PragerU, a fake quote unquote university, non-accredited, partnering with them. They make conservative cartoons that put people like Frederick Douglass in a docile type of mindset for people to say slavery wasn't that bad. And they're partnering with the Department of Education to have this part of the curriculum across the country. It's going to be part of the 250-year anniversary of America's history. So they have the indoctrination game down across all age levels. And so the Smithsonian is just the latest in target. And so when people to talk about, slavery wasn't that bad, he's quoting basically what Jillian Michaels said last week as well on CNN. They take the narrative and they run with it. And so just as easily, look, we've had Holocaust deniers in this country and we still do. And we used to have a society where, if you said things that were kind of disrespectful towards the Holocaust or the memory of that, it was problematic for your career and so on and so forth. Now these people are being propped up and platformed in many different areas. If folks can get away with that, they think it's going to be a home run to say whatever they want to say about slavery. And the fact of the matter is, because of what you said, Clay, that people of Daughters of the American Revolution, run down the list, have always fought to keep history from being properly taught. All of us right here grew up with little history about what happened. And most of what we got about what happened during slavery, Reconstruction, we got outside of school. We got it from our parents, from our community, the brothers and sisters in the hood, maybe at the mosque, from hip hop, KRS-One, You Must Learn. Like, so what little we got, they want to strip away as well. And that last part you said, they are also concerned about white people. I remember a moment during the Black Lives Matter movement when they were about to arrest this young Black boy. He's a student, and when one of his Black female classmates, white female, this young girl, stood in the way of the cops. And that type of moment is something they do not want to happen in this country. They don't want more Viola Luozos and other types of people who stood up. And that's also part of it. And this is part of the backlash to the so-called racial reckoning that happened in 2020 with the murder of George Floyd. They fear more people standing with us, and they're doing everything to make sure that they can't learn about that history to make that happen.
And I don't want this to get lost on anybody. His lawyers, they're going to walk through the museum. The president's lawyers are going to tiptoe through the museum of African American history and culture and decide what's acceptable.
It's unprecedented. It's literally
unprecedented.
Lawyers essentially doing an audit based on what Trump thinks is DEI, or what Trump thinks is not something that shows America in the greatest light. And it is authoritarian. It is authoritarian. We've seen this in other countries. And to your point, Clay, and also yours, Doctor, at the end of the day, this is the first time we've seen a president go all out like this. This is not the first time that we've seen our history be quelled. This is not the first time that we've seen curriculum even be designed to not fully showcase American history, or to hide some of the darkest parts, because they only want to talk about America as in a patriotism. My main focus has always been, as somebody who has had several members of my personal family serve in the United States military, several of them who also lost their lives in protecting this country. It is frustrating that no matter who you are, where you are, unless you are a white American, you are not considered a patriot. This is my country. And at the end of the day, we deserve and we reserve the right to criticize, critique, and force it to make the progress that our Constitution set out for it to be. And to a point you made earlier, Clay, the museum is not the museum of slavery. Yes, that is a functional part of American history. It's a functional part of African American history. But that museum has successes in entertainment, athleticism, music, you name the place and the space, doctors, lawyers, some of the
even Clarence Thomas is in it.
Civil rights movement, astronauts, like you name the success, you can see it in that museum. His focus is on slavery because he does not want it to be talked about. His focus is on slavery because, just like anti-DEI, just like anti-CRT, just like the PragerU curriculum, he wants to redesign American history in the shape and image of white male success. And if that white male success came at the expense of and the detriment of other populations, he wants that to not be recognized.
Well, his whole thing, woke is broke. It really is. History is hard and he can't handle it. That's what it really is. And can you imagine the kind of progress that we would have in this country if after the Civil War, we just would have dealt with the reality? The South lost. The South didn't want to accept that. I don't know if Abraham Lincoln wouldn't have put in the 10% plan to forgive former, before he's even assassinated, he puts in a plan to forgive former Confederates, to basically reinstall them throughout the South. Andrew Johnson continues that plan. But imagine if we would have just said, you know what? This thing called slavery is going to end. We're going to let it end. And we're going to create communities and neighborhoods and towns and use the Homestead Act and all these things to see to it that we have an economic infrastructure post-slavery. Because there were 4 million Black people enslaved. The profit of slavery was more than the banks, railroads, and factories combined in the North. But there was never a commitment to atone for America's original sin. And here we are in 2025. Looking back at 1865 and pre-1865, not able to deal with the truth. That's the issue.
That's right.
This should have been ironed out. One of the things I admire about Germany, in elementary school, young kids begin learning about Nazi Germany to not repeat it again. You don't see Adolf Hitler High School, Adolf Hitler High in Germany.
Thank you.
But you see Robert E. Lee High over here, Robert E. Lee School in America. We shouldn't be celebrating treasonous or insurrectionists. They shouldn't be getting pardons, Abraham Lincoln, nor should they get pardons, Donald Trump. This is how great we would have been if we could have just dealt with this. Now folks don't understand it. Most folks don't know what race and nationality is. They don't understand ethnicity. They don't know what slavery really was. They don't know Jim Crow. They don't know black codes. They don't know chattel slavery. And you got fitness instructor Jillian Michaels on CNN babbling like she's an expert.
Yeah.
I mean, we're in a but this is all rising up. This is what happens after decades and decades and years and generations of not telling the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And when it looked like a bit more, the truth was going to get out there, a touch more. Oh, we got to pull back. We went too far. Now it's woke.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's woke.
Mm-hmm.
CRT didn't really hit as strong as it could have, but now it's wokety woke. And it started locally.
Yeah.
The Anti-Woke Act in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
All those uprisings, if you will, in Virginia over what books are being taught. And they threw gay folks in there and trans folks in there to hope at the end
Virginia
of the day.
had a hotline. They still have that hotline for parents to actually call in and report if their students were learning about Black history, if they were learning about Latino history, if they were learning about, what happened to the Native American population, if they were learning anything about LGBT populations. They literally had a hotline that was run by the state for people to basically call and drop dimes on American history.
Yep. A whole snitch line.